This is why Kevin no longer has the @SecureIdeas handle on Twitter.
No. The reason I don't have the @SecureIdeas happened the other day. Did you see the thread where there's this whole thread about stuff, right? And people are talking and doing all this stuff. And somebody replied back and said, oh, try Cloud at Cost. They're awesome. They're great. You know, like, or I've heard they're good or something like that. And I wrote back and said, no, do not use Cloud at Cost. They sell it as a one-time fee, but that one-time fee never stops. They constantly come back for more money. And the guy I responded to wrote back and said, oh, did you not pay the no more fees fee? And like it was his joke. And this company account, Vulture, I think, VULTR.
Vulture, yeah.
Vulture.
And I'm not blasting them. I'm actually really impressed with how well they handled this thread. Like, this was a good thing. Yeah. They replied to the person who replied to me and was like, hey, talking about no fees, did you see that our new service doesn't have a management fee? And me, being the jerk that I am, I hate when companies do that. Like, they jump onto a thread or, oh, you mentioned a keyword that we want to spam with. And so I just wrote back and said, hey, does this spam thing work for you all? Well, here's where I'm an idiot. I didn't realize they were in the thread. And you know how, like it says, replying to Nathan, Josh, and 7 others. Well, I didn't click the N7 others to see who was on the thread. And so I wrote back and I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. Because people are like, hey, they were on the thread. I'm like, yeah, I missed that. I'm an asshole, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, because I am the Rodney Dangerfield of security, Nathan replied.
No respect. Well,
they tried to defend you. Right? They're like, you're not an asshole. Like, you're an instructor.
I am.
You're a nice guy. And I had to inform them. No, really, you are. Like, I've been fired from SecureIdeas more than anybody else in the history of the company. I can confirm. Absolutely.
Nathan has absolutely been fired by us more than anybody else. I will say, though, Josh, you know about when the person breached our training site and what happened, right?
Yeah. Oh, God, that's a while ago now, isn't it?
No. Do you know what happened after the breach?
No, I don't know what happened after the breach.
Okay, so this is a relevant story because we're talking about the CFAA. So
hold on to that story for a minute, because we just kind of threw ourselves in here. For anybody who's joining us, we're going to talk for the next hour or so about the CFAA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. We're going to eventually get to the recent news with the Van Buren decision and what that means and what the future looks like and all that. There's going to be some rabbit trails and stories in the middle, but with that, let's jump back to the story time, and then we'll wrap it around, and you'll see why this is relevant.
What Nathan didn't say is, anytime you put Josh and I in a room, and adding Nathan to it does not help much.
No, not at all.
We're full of tangents. We're full of lots of things. My eyes are brown, and so we find out one morning that somebody has escalated privileges on our training site. They have like global damn admin. They had higher access than we had on our training site. I'm not kidding. And we wrote a blog that outlined every single thing that happened except the thing I'm about to say. So we are in oh dang mode. You know the mode.
Incident response.
Right? Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to figure out, like, what did they get access to? What did they... Right, all of that stuff. We're at that point. Now, we use Slack internally, which always sounds dumb to say because Slack is an external service, but we use Slack. The person who elevated their privileges name was Ahmed.
Ahmed.
No, it was Ahmed. Ahmed.
Ahmed.
Okay, I don't know how to say. I barely know how to say Kevin. And so all of a sudden in Slack, Ahmed messages me.
No.
Chatting in the general room. Like are
you serious?
Hey, wait, just listen. So I have oh my God, this is bad because like at this point we had thought they had just gotten access to our training site and that's it. And the training site's a third-party hosted system, doesn't make it okay, doesn't make it not our responsibility, but is very, very segmented from the rest of our infrastructure, right? Because we don't run it. We don't do anything with it. So all of a sudden, this person now has access over here and in Slack, which is what we use for like we're talking on jobs, we're working on stuff, and Ahmed is talking to me. And I'm trying to figure out what to do, and I'm panicking because this is bad. We're a security company, and things are going on. The person keeps messaging us, talking to us, taking part in the conversation. I'm freaking out. Ahmed realizes I'm freaking out and says, how about you join me in Perm so we can talk about it? Now, for the people who don't know, because they don't work at Secure Ideas, we have a Google Meet set up that we just
we use Google for everything.
Yeah,
email, file storage,
AWS,
everything.
Right, yeah. And so why don't you join me in Perm, which is this permanently set up Google Meet that we use, just like, hey, let's jump in there and have a quick conversation, which means in my head, and Josh, I'm telling you right now, I am thinking to myself,
this is a joke.
No, I am not thinking to myself, this is a joke. I'm thinking, oh my God, Secure Ideas is done. There is no way somebody would hire a security company whose training site, Slack, and Google Workspace, which is where our email is, where our reporting is, where everything is, has been compromised. There's no way somebody would hire us, right?
Yeah.
And I'm also thinking to myself, what is the requirement for notification? Meaning, not I'm not going to notify, but am I going to be able to get all of my people jobs before their reputation is completely sullied because they worked with me, right? Like that's the mindset I'm going through.
Yeah, no, I know that mindset.
And that's when I'm told by somebody else in the company, Kevin, Nathan changed his name on Slack.
Now I know why Nathan was fired. Now I understand why Nathan was fired.
Yeah. Nathan changed his profile name to the name of the person who had elevated his privilege as a joke. Everybody else noticed
we were all in Perm talking about it and laughing and having a good time. I mean, we were freaked out, but at that point we were kind of thinking, okay, this is pretty limited. It's not as bad.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, hey, watch this. And I changed like the @ symbol, like my profile name. But if you hovered over it, it still showed my picture and my name. And I'm like, oh, Kevin will freak out. He'll look at it and he'll laugh. But he didn't do that.
I went the complete opposite direction. So I call Nathan. I'm downstairs in the parking lot having a heart attack. Like I didn't actually have a heart attack, but my chest hurt. I thought I was dying, right? Like, oh my God, we've been compromised completely, right? And so I call Nathan and I say to him, and I think this is a quote. Nathan will tell me if it is. I think what I said exactly was, in 2 months, this is going to be funny. Today it is not. And I don't think it was more than exactly 2 months later. I'm on a call with a customer.
Did he let you out of the dungeon?
I'm sorry?
Did he let you out of the dungeon, Nathan?
We don't have a dungeon. We're in Florida. We can't have basements. So
I would have dug one for that.
Yeah. I'm on a call with a customer telling them the story of Nathan doing this, laughing about it. I finished with the customer. I hung up. I called Nathan. I said, yep, 2 months. I was just laughing about it. It was, oh my God, I can't believe you did this. Here's how it's relevant.
Yes.
The entire thing about the Van Buren case is that Mr. Van Buren had access, and we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail here. He had access to data in the tag lookup system.
Right.
And he used it in a way he wasn't supposed to, and we can argue what that means exactly, and the case did, right? Which is exactly what Nathan did. Nathan had access to our Slack. He has access to change his profile name to anything he wants to do.
Well, he doesn't have that anymore. So
No, he absolutely still does.
I actually own the Slack channel because Kevin refused to use Slack because it was the cool thing that everybody was using.
I was not. I'm an old curmudgeon.
So Kate and I set one up and just started interacting with it in hopes that eventually Kevin would stumble across it. And sure enough, he went to register it one day to try it, and it automatically threw him in our channel because he had the same email address. And he's like, "What the heck is this?"
By the way, that feature has been turned off for the people who think they will do stuff. Thank you, Ed. Ed is my new favorite person.
Yeah. All right.
Nathan
so
is no longer favorite.
But all seriousness about the Van Buren case, right? A quick synopsis of the case. Officer Van Buren, I think, is the right way to address him because he was a police officer at the time. He had access to the tag registration. It's not NCIS, not NCIC.
It's not NCIC or VICAP. It's the
right.
It's just the license plate database.
Right. And somebody asked him. Somebody turned out to be an undercover FBI agent. Asked him that if they paid him money, would he run a tag for them? And he said yes. My understanding is that they were not investigating him. They were investigating reports of officers doing this in the police department.
Right.
He obviously was one of the officers, but right. And that they put an undercover agent out there, did this thing. Okay, cool. We can argue the bad, the good, the ugly of the FBI undercover thing, that kind of stuff. But here's the twist. He was charged federally under the CFAA, which is the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
USC 1029 and 1030.
Wow, ooh, so formal. I had chills.
He's got the Wikipedia page up in front of him.
You know, I'm doing the CISSP.
Not only does he have the Wikipedia page, he has the Wikipedia voice, because that was definitely a Wikipedia voice, right?
A radio voice.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's USC 1029 and 1030. Thank you.
Narrator says. And the reason he was charged is because CFAA talks about abuse of access and authorization.
Exceeding authorized access.
That's it. Exceeding authorized access. So he was arrested, he was charged, he was found guilty. My understanding is that he even went through an appeal and found guilty still.
Yeah.
Right? He took it, or his lawyers took it, or however you want to phrase that. And by the way, nobody on this webcast presenting are lawyers. So if any of you listening are lawyers, feel free to laugh at us. We'll also laugh at you for being a lawyer.
Use the chat or the Q&A feature and tell us where we're wrong. And yeah, we'd love to chat.
That'd be awesome too. He argued, or the lawyers argued, that he did not exceed his authorization because he was authorized to do the actions he did. Now, why this is so important, other than the fact that, in my opinion, anything we do to get rid of the CFAA and replace it with something that might be better, actually don't replace with anything, but I'll talk about that later. But anything we can do to undermine the CFAA would be good for the greater population. But the reason this was so bad is when he was found guilty, that set the precedent that basically terms of service, lawyers have argued, judges have agreed, that terms of services are now legally binding at a criminal level. Like, a terms of service has always been considered legally binding. Now, of course, we can argue, well, if I break it and they sue me and I win, it's whatever.
But it's a contractual level.
It's a contractual level, civil level. This made it criminal. The Supreme Court, in a 6-3, right? Decision, ruled that Buren was right. Van Buren was right. That he did not exceed his authorization, even though policy at the police department was, don't do this for personal use or whatever. That doesn't even get into the fact that he was paid to do it, right? Just, you're only allowed to do this for your job, and your job is only to do it when you're like supposed to, right? And the Supreme Court said, nope, actually, that's correct. What he did was still wrong. You know, he shouldn't have taken the money. He shouldn't have violated the policies. But violating a policy is not a criminal act. And that's, I think I did a babbling synopsis of it correctly. Josh, Nathan,
vaguely, yeah. I mean, the basic idea is that he had authorized access to run license plates. Okay.
Yeah. He didn't use somebody else's account.
He used his own account. He ran license plates because his job said, I take a piece of paper, I look at the license plate, I run the license plate or over the radio, whatever. I run license plates all bloody day. And then somebody goes, hey, can you run a license plate for me? Well, I run license plates all day, but he didn't have it as a sanctioned event from his agency. Since it was an unsanctioned event, an unsanctioned looking up at the license plate, that's where he broke that line. Now that line, and I'm using it very metaphorically, is a policy line. There's no technical control because he had access to do it already. There's no technical control or compensating control to check that he's doing it per policy. There's no, you can only run a license plate if there's a ticket attached to it, and a ticket can only be generated by somebody else. So let's be honest. They screwed up. They didn't have separation of duties. They didn't have least privilege. They didn't have all of the compensating controls they should have had.
I disagree on least privilege.
So here's the thing. He was able to initiate a search. He was able to retrieve the results of the search. He was able to export the results of the search. So far, so good? Any disagreements there?
No.
Okay. Should he have been able to initiate a search without an appropriate ticket or some form of...
And that's where I think the difference is.
Please.
Because to me, that's a process thing, not a privilege thing. And I'm being pedantic, I believe.
No. Actually, I'm sorry. I think there's a little confusion. Let me explain. I don't think he should have had the privilege to initiate a search. I think the system should initiate the search.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll agree with. Okay, then yes, that's a privilege issue. But that's not because he broke it. The system was designed wrong.
Well, yeah, the system was designed to trust.
So here's an
example. Give me you one example, Nathan. I apologize. Give me 2 minutes. I was a cop back in the early 2000s, and God, I feel old saying that.
You don't have to feel old. You are old.
Yeah, it's true. I'm actually older than you. So we found out the other day. So I was a cop in the early 2000s, and they're like, "Oh, you know computers." I'm like, "Yeah. What am I getting screwed over with this time?" And so they bring me over to the main sheriff substation that was next to the jail. I worked at the jail, and I went through 3 locked doors. Okay. To get to a computer. Now, this is an incredibly impressive computer, i.e. beige box piece of crap.
Packard Bell.
No, I think it might have been an E-machine, but
better.
Or a Gateway. There was a Gateway store nearby in Louisiana, but anyway.
I love the cow boxes.
Dude, the Gateway stores were awesome. Like the post and beam barns, and the stools were like the tractor seat stools. They're amazing. I actually have a tractor seat stool upstairs because of that Gateway store in Louisiana.
Nice.
So anyway, we have I go through 3 locked doors to get to this computer, and they're like, all right, this is where you can run NCIC, National Criminal Information Center, and they teach me how to run it. I'm like, this is a search window. This is not. I put the name and a date of birth and a place of birth and a social security if I've got it, and it comes up with the people and tells me if they've got wants and warrants. It's like, yeah, but there's a special way to do it. I'm like,
I would argue they all have wants. They want things. Go on.
Different usage of the word, term of art. But I'm like, all right, so they're like, it's a heavily protected system. I'm like, physically protected? Yeah, 3 locked doors. Like, no. It's heavily protected because of all the protections they put on the computer. I'm like, the fact that every time I come in here to run these, I have to close 700 fucking excuse my language, windows, because it was the early 2000s and everybody got the NetSend windows and the net.
I don't think that was wrong language to use, because many of those windows were porn ads.
This is true. This is true. And, sort of like, hentai and everything else. And
I think there's an interest on that, Josh. I think there's an interesting part of that ties to this as well. If the system isn't designed to have those limitations in place, is there an assumption that the employees who have been given access will honor the intent of the process, even if the system doesn't enforce it?
Yes.
Because that's really the issue here. Is he violated the intent, even if the system allowed it to happen?
Let's be very clear. It's stood in court many a time that a warning banner is enough, if not more than enough, to notify somebody that anything else is wrong.
Yeah, this is the motto of the day. Unauthorized use of this system is disallowed. Blah blah blah. That you get when you log in via VPN or external login or whatever. And, you must have a thing that's a banner that says you're not allowed to use this unless you're authorized.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there's no gate, there's no delineation or demarcation between just general internet and private system.
And people have argued successfully that even if the system doesn't require authentication or whatever, the banner is considered enough to be a control. No, I want to be very clear. Please do not have anybody walk away from this session thinking Kevin says a banner.
All I got to do is have a banner.
Enough. I got a banner. We're good. No, not.
I think the issue is a banner is enough to prosecute. It's not necessarily enough to remove negligence.
Here's one of the best things. While Nathan has been fired from Secure Ideas more than anybody else, I gotta point out that one of the things Nathan is amazingly good at is take what I mean instead of what I say and put it out there so everybody else goes, oh, that's what Kevin was thinking.
So let's back up here a little bit. One of the, for history, if folks don't know, the CFAA was released in 1986, right? How long ago was that? That's a really long time. I don't do math.
Al Gore had invented the internet by that point.
Barely, just barely.
But Nathan, you can't do math that way because 2001 was 20 years ago, but so was 1980.
1986. All right, yeah, exactly. 35 years ago. So 35 years ago, we have the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Here's the problem. It was very let me back up even further. 1983, Wargames came out.
Man, that was a great movie.
In 1984, Congress passed the first significant change to the criminal code. And as part of that, they added in computer fraud as a problem. And they said, here, the Secret Service has responsibility for investigating that, but they didn't do enough. And so
I'm sorry, if I could just point out real quickly that the biggest problem there is they added the word computer because fraud was already illegal. And I will rant till the cows come home about adding unnecessary laws, but I will agree there's possible reasons why.
So let's come back to that. So in 1986, they expanded that with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
Yep.
And I think we would probably all agree the biggest contention there is the vague language that says exceeds authorization, right? You're using a system or doing something that you're not authorized to do.
But it's not. And so I just got to.
So we wouldn't all agree.
We wouldn't all agree.
I got to give a shout out. Security and Compliance Weekly, the podcast I'm on Tuesdays, we interviewed Priya Chowdhury on this exact discussion a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was. You can find it on YouTube and securityweekly.com and such. And she had a very good point. She said, look, embezzlement is already illegal. Mm-hmm. If your accountant, like Kevin's wife, steals money from... Sorry, I couldn't resist.
My wife's not an accountant.
Well, all right. She's the bookkeeper.
She does our accounting.
if your bookkeeper steals money, they have access to the money as part of their job. But if they steal the money, that is exceeding the access that they should be using. Okay, they're using that access for a different purpose than the business wants it to be, et cetera. So embezzlement is already illegal. And that goes back to what you were saying, Kevin, about, fraud is already bad. Why are we having to separate and segregate out computer fraud?
So here's the original intent of it. Because actually, if you go back and look, technically, the CFAA says that it only applies to government systems, to financial systems, or systems that any kind of activity that hinders the use of the government or financial systems to actually use those systems. Now, in reality,
they added critical infrastructure.
They've expanded it over the years. They expanded, but that original intent was based on the idea of, remember, with Wargames, these kids going out and doing all this stuff, and they basically created denial of service type situations. That was part of the concern, was not that they're stealing information, which was already illegal, but that they were creating damage in a way that hindered the operations of those systems, that hindered the use. And I don't think, are there any other laws against that?
Well, okay. Any other laws against what specifically?
Hindering, like if I stand in front of a bank and kick people in the shins when they walk in.
Yes, there are laws against that. There are not federal laws against that, but there are laws against blocking access to things. The trespassing laws quite often have been used that way. There are other laws.
Videoing in public, you're allowed to video in public, but if you
First Amendment,
if you use a telescopic lens to get into somebody's window from, that's inappropriate.
But that's not preventing use, right? Like that was
preventive
really
use. I mean, obstruction of justice, and
maybe I can see that.
I will go with there are laws about preventing use. They are not federal. Which
federal is really the key point.
Chaining fire doors. You have to be able to get out a fire door. Remember the triangle shirtwaist fire? Not personally, although Kevin, I know we're old.
Yeah.
But
I actually remember that because of books I've read and videos of different things, training videos.
So let's obviously, my point was that's where it started, and from there it's expanded over the years. But and there have been updates and amendments to certain language, but that part about exceeding authorization, that part has never been amended clearly.
And I think that the problem, I disagree with what Josh said. I think that it is a problem because the example you gave of an accountant or a bookkeeper that steals money has exceeded their privileges. While that may be pedantically true, they stole. There's a different action word. Many people call those verbs. That what they did was steal.
Yeah.
Yes, stealing exceeded the access they had.
Let's stay away from money for a second. Let's assume that the accountant. Thank you, Janice. Exactly. So Janice just asked, "Is data not an asset that can be stolen?"
Of course, it can be.
Yes. But it's stolen, but it's copied. It's not like I lose access to it normally.
Somebody else
download
a house
copy of it.
I've downloaded a house. These little doll houses that you can cut out on the glow for, they're awesome.
No, I'm not playing with my dolls. You didn't see me playing with my dolls. And
you know what? I don't think it matters that there's another law that qualifies, because we pass laws all the time that kind of step over other law. Like, for instance, in Oklahoma, they passed a law 2 years ago saying you're not allowed to use your cell phone while you drive. Now, you read the law, and it basically says you're not allowed to drive dangerously, like use your cell phone and drive dangerously. There's already a law against reckless driving. And that was the biggest argument against it, was you're basically making a law that says something that is illegal is now illegal. Like, that didn't prevent them from passing it. I feel like this is sort of the same situation.
It should have prevented them from passing it, because my argument stands. I'm not saying I'm right. I am. But every single time we allow our representatives, because they're not our leaders, our representatives to pass unnecessary laws, what we have done, and this is a completely separate subject, but I want to at least say it. What we have done is we have given up a set of power to a government that has already proven time and time again that it will enable people to abuse it. And I'm not saying the government, I'm not going to argue that whole systemic stuff like that. But every single time we pass a law that says this is bad, and I think the cell phone one is the perfect example, right? We pass the law that says you can't talk on your phone, and a cop can pull you over if you're talking on your phone. And okay, so where's the benefit to that?
That's easy, actually.
Wait. Over just having a law that says if you're driving dangerously, cop can pull you over.
No, that's an easy one to answer.
Okay.
Because it is a legitimate law. And the reason it's a legitimate law is that driving dangerously is, one, a little bit subjective. There are standards and guides in place, but it's a bit subjective. Second, when you're on your cell phone and driving, a lot of times I know people that have driven with their cell phones and don't realize they're driving recklessly. It's not that they're doing it consciously. They've got a lead foot, or in a Tesla. I think it's a lead.
I don't think the second part matters.
Why does it matter? Yeah,
because I don't get pulled over because I feel like I was talking on my cell phone. I get pulled over because the cop said I was driving.
Well, that depends.
If I know I'm speeding or not,
a deterrent, a preventive, a detective. Now you're talking about what the law is used for. If I want the law to be a deterrent, I need to have a law that specifically states, don't drive with your cell phone, idiot.
The law is not a deterrent.
Really?
Yep.
Sure it is.
It is.
It may not be a good one.
It's not made to be a deterrent.
The law itself may not be a deterrent, but when you see people get pulled over and see the stats on, hey, we got 30 people on their cell phones last week, that may be a deterrent.
But I think you're arguing the wrong thing, Josh. I'm not saying they can't pull people over for driving.
Right too.
Okay. No. I'm not saying they shouldn't pass a law that says, I'm not saying cops shouldn't pull people over for driving talking on their cell phone. I totally believe that talking on your cell phone is dangerous and should be stopped. What I'm saying is when we pass laws that are already covered by something else, we are wasting the effort and finances of our government, and we're turning over power to people who shouldn't have that power, right? The answer of driving dangerously is subjective. So is whether or not I'm talking on my phone.
Yeah, I agree with Kevin on this, but we're tangenting a little bit too far into the
it's
political
okay, you guys
philosophies
are
here.
wrong. Don't worry, it's no big deal.
So, you can outvote man. We're a democracy. Well, we're a republic, but let's not go there.
Next week,
I'm the representative. So
next week we will have a political rant about how laws should be made and what's and whatnot.
It's funny. I'll be recording a podcast in 2 hours that will be talking about exactly that.
Coming back to the CFAA, I wanted to compare, and I hate to even bring this guy up, but the Weave case has to be brought up.
Oh dear.
It does.
If for those that don't remember, Weave is a complete waste of skin in every possible way.
He's a waste of carbon. Do you know
waste of carbon. You know what? I would totally be cool with the saving carbon stuff if Weave was one we got rid of.
If we can inject the carbon in him and just put him down,
There you go. So here's the situation. Regardless of his personal stuff he does,
his self-proclaimed Nazism,
We've signed up for the new iPad. If you guys remember when Apple said, "Hey, we're not going to create iPad 2, we're going to call it the new iPad."
And so bad.
Yeah,
so
right.
Bad.
It's whatever year it was. Well, we've signed up for that, and he got it. And he said, "Hey, cool, I got this new toy." And of course, what do you do? Like any hacker, when he activated it, he pushed it through Burp or Wireshark or whatever, and he captured the traffic. And he noticed, hey, this device, as part of the registration and activation, is reaching out to AT&T. It's making this API call or some URL, and it just had an integer value. And so what happened is when he submitted that integer, it gave back his details, his email address, his cell phone number, his home address, some other details about his order. And so, like any hacker who is also a criminal, he said, what happens if I change this number? Oh, look, I got somebody else's details. And then he took it to the next step and said, okay, what if I just cycle through every possible number? And then he literally harvested all of the data for everybody who had registered for a new iPad, which, if you can imagine at the time, you got celebrities, you've got politicians, you've got military folks, you got a lot of data. So it seems like that is not that much different than maybe what Van Buren did. I'm curious what you guys think. Where's the difference, and why does Weave deserve to be prosecuted and maybe Van Buren doesn't? Or why was Weave prosecuted?
Let's use a different case than Van Buren just for a minute, okay?
Okay.
Incredibly similar case.
Wouldn't Weave be the other case we're using?
No. DEF CON. And actually, you and I talked about this not that long ago. So if you bought a DEF CON ticket, and some of you might be at DEF CON recently, or heading to DEF CON now, if you bought a DEF CON ticket, they sent you a confirmation with a 4-digit code at the end of the URL. So
we talked about it on the last Lunch and Learn. You said it like it was this random other conversation. Sorry,
last Friday.
Do you know
last Friday?
So the parameter tampering was very simple to do, as in like he just little backspace 3, backspace 4, backspace 5.
Same concept.
I think it was 5 or 6 of them, and we went, okay, this is confirmed. This is ridiculous, and he stopped right there. And he went and he notified everybody, and he appropriately. Oh, dear.
Well, he didn't notify everybody. He notified the people, the owners of the system, and
he notified the appropriate owners
and
of
the
system.
press.
Not initially.
No. I'm talking about Weave.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think,
and that's the difference.
The DEF CON guy actually went and notified the appropriate people. He did very responsible disclosure. Yes, exactly. And then they fixed it, and then he disclosed it after they fixed it, and that was absolutely lovely. And it worked out really well. But what Weave did was he downloaded everything. He downloaded all of them. He went
and called a reporter.
I wonder if I could write a script that'll download every single UUID and appropriate and associated information.
Actually, worse. Didn't he write to AT&T first and say, "Pay me, and I won't tell anybody about this"?
No.
And when they said no, he then called the reporter.
I don't remember that.
I could be wrong. If I remember correctly, he reached out to some of his other contacts and tried to sell the data privately first.
Yeah,
and then when he couldn't, and that was a big part of the prosecution was he couldn't sell it to somebody. So then he tried to blackmail AT&T. They wouldn't pay. So then he contacted a reporter.
Yeah.
So in all three of those cases, he had the worst intent.
If we could respond verbally to some of those,
Janice
is. I want to be very clear. Janice is one of my favorite people. She
Mine
is
too.
awesome. No, I like her better, but she asked the question: would companies like AT&T do security correctly if people like Weave didn't embarrass them? And my answer is yes, they would, and of course, no, they wouldn't. Sure. It depends, right? This has been a long beaten horse. I'm not going to call it a dead horse, but pretty close to being dead. Of that, we do better by letting people know about vulnerabilities that they didn't ask us about. And here's where I have a problem with it, because you then go to ask, how often do researchers try responsible disclosure and get no response or action? And here is, I am literally going to finish recording this webcast, and I am going to get on a phone call with a customer who received a researcher, and I have long said, and it's been tweeted and embarrassed people and made people mad, that security researcher is often another term for criminal.
Some are.
No, not some. Often. Okay. The majority of people, I would even argue, probably wrong there, that call themselves security researchers that work outside of the bug bounty companies.
Oh, okay. Then we're I mean, because there's a lot of bug bounty people out there that
there's a lot of bug bounty people, and most, let's just go with many are actually criminals that are using it as a way to get an excuse. For example, my customer right now they don't have a bug bounty program. They got a vulnerability reported to them. Now, second problem, and here is why, this is why I say the problem with your question, not with your question, but with why that's a problem, where legitimate people who are saying, hey, this is a flaw, and they get ignored, many times the reason is of the noise we get from the people who don't know what they're doing. Bug bounties have been promoted, and I've done it myself, as a way for somebody who's trying to learn to go out and see how to do things.
I think it's a great idea.
But here's the problem. We have people who don't have two brain cells to rub together who will report things. They will browse a website through Burp and report clickjacking. They will browse through something. We had somebody wrote to us and said, you're vulnerable to Heartbleed. And I'm like,
where?
I hope not, right? Like, man, that sounds bad. And we patch and we maintain and we scan our own stuff. We have a third party test us. We try to do everything. And I will not claim that we are secure, because we're not.
No such thing.
Nobody is. We're just secure ideas. And we wrote back to the guy and said, what do you mean? And it turned, long story short, he ran Nmap against our website in debug mode. And he ran the Heartbleed script. The Heartbleed script wrote back the result, the output that he sent me a screenshot of, literally said, not vulnerable to Heartbleed. But because it was in debug mode, it showed the handshake between the HTTPS server and the client. And this person thought that meant we were vulnerable and reported it to us, right? That's why we have so much noise, because the vast majority of organizations that don't officially do bug bounty programs don't do bug bounty programs for a good reason. And there's lots of good reasons.
I can't tell you how many of the websites that I manage, and it's not a lot, but for like our HOA and a couple other places, I regularly get automated scans from a clearly hacked version of Acunetics. Like the report demonstrates that it's a hacked version of Acunetics, where somebody has found all these flaws and they send it to me and they're willing to fix it for me. Like to Janice's question, imagine a world where researchers had a recourse that led to accountability, blah, blah, blah. To me, it sounds like you're saying, you know what, we can stop school shootings by giving every kid a pistol. Like it would go away. We would not have to worry about attackers coming after schools, right? Like it's a theoretical good idea, but what you're talking about doing is
add a different problem.
Exactly. That's my point. Right. You're talking about empowering, I don't want to say idiots, but most of the time idiots who don't have a clue what they're doing, you're giving them the ability to create a huge nightmare for the people that are actually trying to do a good job, but already don't have the resources to deal with this stuff.
The cost of responding to security researchers that you haven't asked to do stuff is enormous. It's one of the things I laugh about on Twitter, and I will take all the hate mail you want to send me for this one. But the sheer number of security people that are blabbing their ignorance of how organizations actually run is sad and horrifying, because we're talking about big names in our industry that will make comments like, it doesn't cost an organization anything to patch, or no, getting a security report from a random person on the internet is perfectly fine and causes no harm, ignoring the regulatory requirements some organizations have that they have to respond to, ignoring the cost of figuring out if the report is accurate, ignoring the cost of doing all this. And I'm not saying that cost isn't reasonable, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be doing it already, but we as an industry, and the CFAA is a perfect example of how government and the industry screw each other because we don't talk or understand what each other do. We don't understand what we're trying to protect in many cases, and that's a problem. I would not sell them a spot in our class, Ed, because we teach ethics.
Let me ask you a question. So I hear what you're saying about the cost and time, effort, fright, annoyance when somebody, I don't know, changes a Slack name or, or runs burp against a target that isn't asking. If you've got a bug bounty system or program,
that's different. If you have a bug bounty program, that's different.
But if you don't have one and somebody runs burp or nmap or whatever against you, and they say, hey, by the way, you're vulnerable to heartbleed. It's time, it's effort, it's annoyance factor. It's what the hell. It's, do I need to report this? Even if it's a false positive, do I need to report this to anybody? Could somebody screw me later down the road for not reporting it, etc.? But I mean, there's also things like people make mistakes. I remember Jason Street giving a talk about how he hacked the wrong bank in Lebanon. Like literally, he literally hacked the wrong bank because they gave him bad information.
Josh, what that is a mistake, not somebody we've hacked the wrong people. I tell the story all the time of a customer of ours gave us a /24 and said, go. We looked at the /24. We did a reverse on the names to make sure that they owned it. Every name came to the ISP in the town. We reached out to our customer and said, we can't verify that you own this entire /24. Can you please verify it? Yes, we own the /24. You positive? Yes, we are. Great. We started testing the /24. We found RDP with a blank administrator password, and we logged into Microsoft servers, Windows servers, that had mugshots, arrest records, and investigative reports. We stopped. We called our customer, who was a bank, not a police department, and said, hey, I know that in small towns, quite often, the large employer will host stuff for the city. Are you hosting anything for the local police department? No. Why would you ask that? Well, here's what we got. And they said, oh, we'll check to see if we own that /24. And I'm thinking, what? We, and they came back and they said, no, Kevin, we made a mistake, but don't worry about it. We're only off by one. We don't own the /24. We own the /23, right? So, which for people who don't know CIDR addressing, that's half the size. So not only had we hacked the wrong organization, but we cut out the middleman of who could arrest us for it.
So I want to pivot off of that, because that, I think, pulls us back a little bit to the Weave incident. Yeah. When the Weave prosecution happened, there was a lot of conversation about, is this a valid use case of the CFAA? And the reason is, all Weave did was went to a URL. Now, he went to that URL thousands of times.
Available URL.
Publicly accessible. It's completely, nobody argues that AT&T screwed up, right? AT&T should have had a better system. It should have required authentication. Whatever. Yeah, we get that.
How long ago was that?
I don't remember for sure. But
I think it was 1873.
Yeah, it wasn't that far. So here's the thing, though. The argument was,
they didn't have TCP.
Weave didn't violate the CFAA because all he did was go to this public URL, and he had authorization to go to it all he did was change the input that he provided.
Exceeds.
Well, so one of the arguments from the prosecution about the complaint that this was an abuse of the CFAA was that the prosecution has flexibility to make a decision about whether or not to prosecute based on the intent of the action. And what Kevin's describing here, where we tested the wrong person, we had no malicious intent. And, you know, the way we handled it, I think was fair. We clearly did have malicious intent, and that was demonstrated in the court. So I think the question that
so much harder to establish, so much
exactly.
harder to prove. Look,
and so the question
what if you decided, you know what, Nathan got a warrant in that town. We all know about Nathan. And so let's just pretend to hack the company we've got a contract with, but let's just erase that warrant.
Nathan has never had a warrant in his life, and you can't prove otherwise.
Yeah, well, you know, that's correct.
We erased it.
We can't prove it.
So the question I have, though, is a vague law that gives the flexibility to the prosecution and their ability to decide, do we want to prosecute this or not? And basically leaves it up to the court to decide, is this a valid, you know, a subjective decision? Is that a good situation? Or is it possible to replace the CFA with something more specific that takes that subjectiveness away from the court?
So then okay, so your question is subjectivity versus objectivity. And I like that. That's a really good thing. And actually the Supreme Court, which by the way, I don't think we even mentioned that yet. The Van Buren case is a Supreme Court of the United States case.
I thought I did. I'm sorry. Yes.
No, I don't think I did, but whatever.
And they are the Supreme, which means they come with sour cream and tomatoes.
I was thinking they have backup singers, but whatever.
I'm going with the Taco Bell reference.
So no, but in all seriousness,
I think the answer, Janet, is 0.
Yeah, seriously. It's a subjective versus objective question, right?
They all do it. So by definition, they're qualified.
Is there an objective way? 100% of prosecutors are similarly qualified.
Exactly.
So, is there an objective way to determine exceeded authorized access? If we assume that exceeded authorized access is the bar, is the thing you have to cross to be a criminal, okay? I know it when I see it. Damn it, that's obscenity.
That's
not
exactly what it is.
Exceeded authorized access.
It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing.
It is
10 years ago.
I'm not done.
Okay.
So exceeded authorized access. In the Van Buren case, the Supreme Court said there has to be a gate. There
has to be Go on. Keep going.
I have the mute controls too, you know. So yeah, no worries. And so you know, it's like
did you have a point you're getting to, or is this
wait, there we go. Save. There we go. So
he hasn't even seen it yet.
No, I haven't. That's the problem.
So the problem is now the Supreme Court is saying there has to be a gate. The question is it a technological gate? Is it a policy gate? The definition of a gate is something that's at stake here. Now, if we assume it's an objective thing, we have to be very specific with policies. We have to attempt to codify those policies into process, and we have to attempt to lock down those processes with compensating controls.
And you have to do that in a short time frame and hope the technology doesn't change in the course of that 6 months that it took to get passed.
Exactly. If we assume that it's a subjective, okay, then it's not as oh, this is going to go bad fast. Did you notice what I named Jeannie, by the way?
Yes.
And I actually had in there earlier, you know, the person who put Moose in there has been sacked, and I went the whole way. But okay, so anyway, in all seriousness, subjective versus objective is a real problem, and we have to determine how we need to embody that gate idea into our process, procedure, technology, compensating controls, and everything else. And I wanted to sort of bring that up.
If I may, I think you're right. I think you've got a good point. I think, though, here's why this is a bigger problem today. If you had asked me 10 years ago, is a subjective law okay? I would have said yes. As a matter of fact, in many cases, I still happen to agree that a subjective law not only is okay, to be clear, honestly, I also think it's mandatory when you're trying to legislate stuff that changes as fast as technology does, if we're going to ignore the idea that laws against theft work in the internet, right?
You wouldn't download a house.
You wouldn't download a house. I did. And but I paid for it through Etsy. But so here's the problem. And this is a conversation, I'm going to throw it out there, but it really is just an out there topic, is we have seen Aaron's law Aaron is one of the good examples of where the prosecution has used their subjectivity to beat and subdue a suspected criminal, right? We've seen where the prosecution has done bad things, and I'm not even getting into them lying and stuff like that. That's that's also illegal, but it is completely legal for a prosecutor to say, I'm going to charge you with 100 crimes because all 100, which goes back to my statement of passing multiple laws that cover the same thing, encourages that behavior.
Well, I mean, we've got I think they gave him like 1,000 iterations of the same crime because he did it 1,000 times or whatever.
For those that don't know, Aaron Swartz.
Thank you. I blanked on his last name.
Was it MIT? I think he broke into it. No, he didn't break into it. He had access to a library.
JStore.
There were some certain resources, the JStore resources that were only accessible within the library. So he basically got into a wiring closet, plugged his computer in, and downloaded all of that. He was tried, and the prosecution, basically, he tried to manipulate the whole situation and say, he tried to argue legitimately this was not a violation of CFAA. The prosecution went way overboard in basically trying to intimidate him by, throwing the maximum penalty for every file he downloaded, which was millions and millions of years. And then ultimately he killed himself before the trial finished. So we never saw the result of that.
Well, and one of the main reasons that people say he killed himself is that he had acknowledged he had done what they accused him of, right? Not that he pled guilty. He had said, yes, I downloaded those things because he was information should be free and right. He had access to this JStore stuff. Not JStore.
Yeah, it's JStore.
It's JStore, I think. Yeah,
JStore is the academic paper library or database.
Because academic paper library is abbreviated JStore, and the argument was he had access because he was a student. He exceeded his access because he was downloading it and sharing the documents with other people publicly, what have you. And so, I think subjective laws are important because, okay, it's illegal to kill somebody. Okay, what about Nathan and I go in somewhere and we threaten somebody and they have a heart attack because we scared them so bad? Did we kill them?
Yes.
Right? But wait, I know that the law says we have, but that is I didn't do it. I didn't, right?
If someone dies during the commission of a felony, it's capital murder automatically.
You are describing the laws that have been passed after the law that says don't kill people, right?
This is an additional.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is that we subjectively, I don't think it was necessary to pass that second law. I'm okay with it being passed. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying we could have subjectively said, yes, you killed the person, and the court could make that decision.
So there's a difference. You're talking about the trade-off between judgment, giving people judgment, and making sure that there's whether you call it not allowing them to have the judgment, making sure they're doing the right thing, which is what's said about these things. It's like mandatory minimum sentencing. Right. And the idea of mandatory minimum sentencing is, I happen to agree with you, but the idea of mandatory minimum sentencing is they were getting, because the judge said, oh, that's a bad law, I'm just going to give you a nothing sentence for it. When in reality, they're supposed to give them what is an appropriate sentence for the crime committed. They said mandatory minimum sentencing. What actually happened was, and this happened to me, I worked in the jails, and we would, for overcrowding, we would release murderers and rapists and very, very significant criminals over kids that were smoking pot because the mandatory minimum sentencing didn't allow for us to release them on an overcrowding.
I think the problem is a lot of laws, probably most laws, if not all, require some level of it requires somebody with intelligence to say, is this a violation or not? Like somebody has to interpret that and make a decision. And to Kevin's point, as we've passed more and more laws, as we've allowed federal regulations and state regulations to balloon out of control, we've got to the point where we no longer have enough people to manage that subjective decisions. You've got less intelligent people making those decisions. More of them having to be made because there's so many laws. And so we look at saying we got to have more regulation to explain how to do it.
I don't think they're less intelligent. I think they're less knowledgeable.
Okay, less educated.
Yeah. There are absolutely less intelligent people. I live in Florida, and so
I learned yesterday. Kevin knows all of the Florida mans.
Yes,
like when you read Florida man does this, Kevin knows them all.
It's my neighbor. Yeah. So,
Kevin, that's not smart to announce. They might see it in their trailers and go, "Yeah, we're gonna find you."
I'm okay with that. Like I said, I live in Florida. Offline, asked me about the truck, and so I've got to go in 4 minutes because I have a customer call I've got to jump to. But I think it boils down to this. I think the Van Buren decision was a good one.
I agree.
I think Van Buren absolutely should be prosecuted. I think absolutely Van Buren should be in jail or punished in some way. The reason I say that is because he was a police officer. And I believe that all police officers should be held to a higher standard when they commit crimes. And we can argue the whole whatevers. I'm just saying, if you are put in a position of power and you abuse that position of power, whether it's a cop or not, you should be held to a higher standard. I absolutely agree, though, the CFAA was not the standard he should have been held to.
Well, you remember
in my opinion.
And I know this is a trope at this point, but the CFAA was written literally by showing Congress the movie Wargames, which is why we mentioned it at the beginning. Yep. And they went, oh my God. And I mean, as annoying sometimes as Mitnick is, and he's a nice guy to talk to and hang out with.
No, he's not.
I've had a lovely dinner with him. He's a lovely guy that way. But I mean, they held him without phone privileges because they thought he could whistle a nuclear warhead out. I mean,
do you know how many of his books I've signed?
Oh, wait, as him?
No, as me. I would never fraudulently sign as him. I have lots of people who
hold on. Is signing his book as him, would that be a violation of the CFAA?
Yes.
No, it's not a computer. It's not a computer.
No.
Fair enough.
It's a computer book. And no, there are many people who think I look like Kevin Mitnick. And I say this because I've had at least 100 people bring a copy of his book to me.
No, seriously?
Can you sign your book? And I decided a long time ago I would. And I would sign it Kevin Johnson. And I'd say, great meeting you, Kevin Johnson. Aren't you glad neither of us have been arrested? Kevin Johnson. Like things like that, right? And I actually have a monitor on eBay. Every single time one of his autographed books go up, I look at it and I'm waiting for the day that somebody sells a Kevin Mitnick book that I signed. It has not happened yet. So if you had Kevin Mitnick sign your book, look at the last name.
Double check.
If it says Johnson or Mitnick.
All right, we need to wrap it up. We're down to 1 minute, and I know we've all got stuff we got to run to after this. So, guys, it's been great.
Pleasure. Thank you.
We may need to this may need to be a regular thing, like maybe a monthly or quarterly thing or something where we ran about something. I don't know. We'll see what
I personally think that Josh, Kevin, and Nathan should always be allowed to rant about random stuff. And
I like the idea. Let us know. Reach out to us, info@securideas.com or @securideas on Twitter. Josh, how can folks get a hold of you real quick?
At Quadling on Twitter or
Josh @securideas.com.
I don't know if that works.
It doesn't.